Guten Morgen and Halle. That's the only German I'm going to say to you this morning because, as just said, I cannot speak about food safety in German or in French, my mother tongue, only in English, working in an international context since 4 years on that topic. Well, thank you very much for the organizer for inviting GFSI. I'm very happy to be here with you today to speak about the Global Food Safety Initiative. Thank you very much as well for having an hotel just by the München Hofbrau. That reminded me my Erasmus years, so thank you for the organizer to do that. So my name is GERARDI. I worked at the Global Food Safety Initiative since 4 years now, and I work on what we call at GFSI the public and private partnerships and capacity building programs, and as well on everything related to the global outreach, so GFSI expansions in several regions of the world. So I will explain you today what is GFSI and why and how we started to work on e-commerce issues and what we are planning to do in the next coming months and years on e-commerce as well. So just to start with, GFSI is one of the 5 pillars of the Consumer Goods Forum. This is a CEO-driven organization made of 50 CEO from the consumer goods industry. 25 of those retailers are manufacturers, and 25 of them are retailers. And they decided to join together several years ago to work on several transversal trends and challenges that they all need to tackle collectively as the industry to talk to their stakeholders. So we're talking about social responsibilities, environmental, social responsibilities. We're talking about end-to-end value chain, health and wellness, and food safety as well. So what is GFSI? How many of you in the room have heard about the Global Food Safety Initiative before now? Oh, that's not too bad. Good. So GFSI was born almost 20 years ago. We're going to celebrate our 20th birthday next year. Due to several food safety crises, recalls in the industry, a lot of audit fatigues among retailers and manufacturers, the industry decided to collectively take actions and to create the Global Food Safety Initiative in 2000. What is it exactly that we are talking about? So this is what is super important at GFSI. Me and my colleague Marie-Claude in the room, we have a boss, a GFSI director. We're in Paris. But we used to say that we have 25 bosses as well, and they are our bosses. So GFSI is driven by a board of directors made of VPs of food safety. They usually have regulatory affairs, food safety, sustainability in their portfolio. And they are the ones driven the GFSI initiative and the topics and the strategic at GFSI. What is super important is that those people and all the industry working with us decided to say that food safety was a non-competitive issue. So when they are working all together, they are sharing their good practices, their best practices on how they manage their food safety in their supply chain to all together move forward and have better food safety management system in their own corporation and in their supply chain. And this is very important for us, and they all agree that the overall objective is safe food for consumers everywhere. So what does it mean and what are we? So almost 20 years ago, the retailers and the manufacturers had realized that they had almost the same kind of criteria in their checklist, in their audits. But it was absolutely not harmonized. And they were having audits in their different sites and plants and having a huge burden of audit on their supply chains. They decided jointly to create what we call today the benchmarking requirements, a set of common criteria for the retailers and the manufacturers to have the exact same requirements on food safety to perform audits all over the world. So the idea was for all the food business operators, from farm to fork, to have the exact same checklist in their audits. And we are what we call today a benchmarking organization. So with those set of criteria settled 20 years ago that we're still working on and updating every year since 20 years, we do benchmark and recognize what we call certification program owners, so private food safety standard certification program owners. What is the benefit for the buyers, what we call the buyers at GFSI, so the companies that you see at the board of GFSI? It's first increasing consumer confidence. Of course, it's not duplicating audits in the supply chain, not duplicating the audit fatigue among suppliers, reducing costs, having a food safety worldwide passport. A GFSI certification, when a site has an audit and passes the audit, it gives a GFSI certification, and that certificate has exactly the same value all over the world. It gives comparable audit approaches. It's enhancing trade opportunities, giving more perspective to small and medium enterprise. If you have a certificate and you are supplying the Coca-Cola company with sugar, then if you give that same certificate to another potential buyer, like Nestle, who is looking for sugar, it gives you market opportunities. And it's cutting cost efficiency through the supply chain. And the idea is to focus more on coaching and mentoring the suppliers instead of just being the cops and providing audits. This is the GFSI model. How does it work in reality? We have this GFSI document, the benchmarking requirements, and we assess and we benchmark certification owners, certification program owners, by setting requirements. In the content, we do set requirements in the way we are going to recognize, assess, benchmark the certification program owners, and we do set requirements on the food safety management system aspects as well. And then we have accreditation bodies with who we work a lot as well that are overseeing the CPOs, the certification program owners, and then we have the sites. So the benchmarking requirements on which we assess and benchmark the certification program owners, for the last 20 years, we have developed scope that are covering the entire supply chain from farm to fork. We have more than 10 scopes today, from primary production to manufacturing. We cover packaging, we cover as well the brokers and agents scope, food service, which is all dedicated to restaurants, the processing as well, the farming of grains and plants, and all those are developed among the industry with our stakeholders throughout the year through a collaborative process. What's in it for the food system, and what are the benefits of GFSI? The idea is not to replace public inspections, is to make sure that we have the right food safety culture in the companies by performing audits that gives better food safety management system to the suppliers. For authorities, it's about improving, and for everyone here, it's about improving public health. It's also a way for the business to collaboratively work together by promoting compliance with the international and the national regulatory frameworks that we have. We are very keen on promoting codex at GFSI, and we have a specific program that does that, and I will tell you more about it. It's as well providing a continuous improvement for companies and for the food system among the supply chain. And it's giving a culture of compliance. By having being prepared for an audit, there is a culture of self-regulation and being ready for the next steps when new regulations are coming in place. And it's improving product integrity as well for everyone. So those are the benefits of GFSI. What we do and how we do it, that's super important for us at GFSI. So we are here to recognize food safety management programs based on the GFSI benchmarking requirements. We do bring food safety experts all together to work on the global challenges. And we like to say that we drive global change through thought leaderships, through some key projects and topics to stay at the state of the art of food safety. We are, for example, working on various topics right now, and we have developed for the last years some guidelines on food fraud, on food safety culture, and being here talking about e-commerce with you is another example of how we like to tackle those new challenges. What we don't do is make policy for retailers of manufacturers. That's not our role. We do not undertake any accreditation or certification activities ourselves. We are a global benchmarking organization assessing and recognizing certification program owners. Then the standard owners are the ones who are owning their standards, performing the audits. So today, those are the certification program owners that have been recognized. We have 9 of them, and the 2 latest that have been recognized are 2 Japanese certification program owners. So what is our strategy at GFSI? 3 years ago, we developed a new strategy with 3 priorities. The first one is keep doing what we do well since 20 years, harmonization and raising the standards of food safety certification programs. So keep being a benchmarking organization, a global benchmarking organization. The second one is building capabilities among the supply chain. And this is something that is very important for us. 7 years ago, the industry, with NGOs, academics, and regulators, developed what we call the Global Markets Program. This is a capacity building tool, only a capacity building tool, and we call it the pathway to GFSI certification. It's providing a skill and competency framework for less sophisticated small and medium enterprise to access in an incremental way to the GFSI certification. This is an open source tool available on our website. And the idea through this second strategic priority is to scale up that use of the Global Markets Program in all the supply chain around the world, especially in emerging markets such as Latin America, Asia, Africa, and to as well work with international governmental organizations and international non-governmental organizations so that they can use the certification program and the Global Markets Program. And the third strategic priority, and that's as well why I'm here in the room today with you guys, is the public-private partnership priority. This is more and more fostering dialogue with public authorities on who we are and how we can collaborate at the global and at the local level to harmonize food safety management system and to support capabilities in the supply chain. So how do we work at GFSI? We have today more than 150 people from industry, academics, authorities, working with us in some technical working groups at the global level on various topics. And this is very important to work with all our stakeholders. So we work as well with our certification program owners, with our accreditation bodies, with academics, and with consumers association as well. I told you at the beginning of my presentation I had 3 hats. One of the hats is GFSI Regional Outreach. 5 years ago, GFSI was 15 years old, and we felt that the momentum at the global level among the corporation on food safety was very high among the big corporations, the big international corporations, but we needed to create a momentum at a more local level. So we decided to create what we call the GFSI local groups. Those are branches of hubs of companies working all together to improve locally their supply chains all together using the GFSI tools. Today we have 7 local groups, and we are covering a big part of the world. The oldest one was the GFSI local group in Japan, 7 years old. We have a strong local group in China, and I will talk to you more about our local group in China because they are key in working on e-commerce. We have a local group in GFSI in Europe, working mainly with food safety authorities. And we have 3 local groups in America. One for South Latam, covering Brazil, Argentina, and Chile mainly. We have a specific local group for Mexico, and we have another local group for the US, Canada countries. And again, this US, Canada local group is key in working on e-commerce, and I will tell you more about what they have been doing on that topic recently. As I was telling you, we want to stay at the state of the art on food safety issues. And right now we have more than 150 people working in various working groups. The idea of those working groups, it's not to speak, it's not a conversation club, it's to see how they can implement and give tools so that all those topics can be included into the benchmarking requirements. So we are talking about taking those topics and transforming them into criteria to perform better audits and to give tools to companies to tackle those challenges in their food safety management systems. So my colleague here, Marie-Claude, is working on those topics with the industry. We have created recently a pre-harvest handlings of animals working group. We are working closely with OIE on that one. We have created a service provision certification, so that's a very weird name. We are working with the ecosystem of GFSI, what we call the service providers, people who are giving pest control services, packaging services, for example, to give them criteria on food safety so that they can have more compliant buying policies in the companies. We are working as well on hygienic design of equipment and facilities for foods. So as I told you, we are really trying to cover really from farm to fork, giving guidelines on criteria on hygienic design. We have a specific group dedicated to primary production. One of the key topics we have developed in the last 3 years at GFSI with e-commerce is primary production. We have welcomed for e-commerce the VP of Amazon, Carleta Otton, and we have welcomed Dole Company, the VP for Food Safety and Regulatory Affairs from the Dole Company at the GFSI Board of Directors 2 years ago as well. And there is another one that just finished a working group for chemicals in food hygienes. And again, this group has been working with Codex on that topic. So what are the tools? I talked to you already a lot about the benchmarking requirements. Really, this is a set of criteria. We review those benchmarking requirements with a new version every 3 years. I've talked as well about the Global Markets Program, or step-by-step approach, or capacity building tool. We have created as well a technical equivalent, which is a tool limited to governments to have a specific government-owned food safety certification programs. And we have what we call as well the auditor exam. That was one of the big changes in the last version of the benchmarking requirements. So let's talk about it. 2 years ago, we issued the 7th version of the benchmarking requirements at GFSI. It means for the last 19 years, the industry have been working on the 7th version, and today we are running on the version 7.2. And there were some big changes in the benchmarking requirements 2 years ago. Every time we issue a new version, every 3 years, we do reassess all the certification program owners, and they have to be compliant with all the new criteria. Otherwise, they are not recognized by GFSI. Even the ones that have been recognized for the last 15 years, if they don't comply with the new requirements, after performing our assessment, our desk review and our benchmarking, if they don't comply with the new criteria, they are not recognized. What we had included is food fraud requirements in those benchmarking requirements. That was important for us to work on that. The industry worked and developed some guidelines for companies to have food fraud processes in place. We have developed as well what we call at GFSI the integrity program, which I will tell you more about in 1 minute. So what is the integrity program? This is everything that relates to auditor competence. The industry felt that they needed to talk and tackle this challenge together to strengthen the credibility of the audit against the GFSI recognized certification programs. So we have developed and increased our auditor competence model in the last version of the benchmarking requirements based on 3 things. We have included an integrity program in the benchmarking requirements. So we are taking that into consideration when we do assess certification program owners. We have included as well, after a long work among the industry, the certification program owners, the certification body, a joint GFSI exam setting a set of skills and competencies for auditors. And we have made a publication on auditor competence at GFSI. A small focus on food fraud. We have included in the last benchmarking requirements some essential elements on food fraud. The idea was to include a food fraud vulnerability assessment, a food fraud mitigation plan, so that all the companies can have in the radar food frauds in their food safety management system. I talked already a lot about the Global Markets Program, but I'm just going to come back to it for a minute. This is a very strong tool, and so strong that we have been successfully used by more stakeholders that we thought would use that program. So this is our capacity building tool. And when the industry sat around the table, they say, okay, we need to give companies a way to implement incrementally better food safety management system. And getting to a level of the GFSI certification all at once can be very scary and can be not easy to do for less sophisticated companies. So we sat together with academies, with NGOs, and we decided to create an incremental approach to get the GFSI certification. It's an open source tool available on my GFSI website, has been translated by various stakeholders throughout the year in different languages. And this is a checklist that you can take as a company to self-assess where you are in your food safety management system. And that checklist has been divided into 3 parts. We took the benchmarking requirements and we divided it into a checklist, taking the first 40% part of the benchmarking requirements to create the basic level. We said this is a non-negotiable part of food safety. In that basic level, we include everything that is related to HACCP and all the codex requirements that help less sophisticated small and medium enterprise all over the world to have guidelines on how to be compliant with codex. That tool is being more and more used in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in China, and as well we are seeing in a lot of European countries. And then we decided to say, okay, let's create an intermediate level to take 60% of the benchmarking requirements to go to the next level. At any time of the process, a supplier can take a self-assessment to see where are its non-conformities, and they can prepare themselves to audit, to public inspections, to see where they are in terms of food safety management system, and to help them have a better food safety culture. So I wanted to talk to you a bit more about what we do on public and private partnership at GFSI. We developed a strategy to work more with authorities 3 years ago. We think that as the food safety networks are becoming more and more globalized and more interconnected, we really see a shift towards greater transparency among consumers. And we cannot build a safer, more efficient food system without all working together. And therefore, we want to foster the dialogue, but not only the dialogue, projects, actions, collaboration with public authorities, with international standard-setting bodies such as Codex, OIE, and IPPC. So we have made a priority to foster that dialogue and to be a platform, a global and a local platform to discuss with authorities in an open way about how to improve food safety, to make safe food for consumers everywhere. Concretely, how does that work? We are working on harmonizing food safety regulations. We are working with several governments in Latin America, in the US, in Asia, to see how we can interact and look at the benefits of the accredited third-party certification system. We are working as well to strengthen food safety capabilities in emerging markets with food safety authorities. And we are working on reducing barriers to trade. This is a key challenge, and providing an audit with a certification that is recognized all over the world is clearly a market access benefit. So with who do we work today? We do have several projects. All those projects are fulfilling those 3 objectives. Alignment or sharing of data. This is something that comes up a lot when we discuss with governments, and we felt there was a need to discuss more about that. Data sharing and transparency together, how we can exchange with public authorities data between the private sector and the public sector. Capacity building, how authorities, trade associations can use the GFSI Global Markets Program. And harmonization and modernization of national food safety system. So we do work with Canada Food Inspection Agency, with the US FDA. We work with Mexican authorities. We have project with Ministry of Agribusiness of Argentina, with the Food Safety Agency of Chile. We work a lot with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries of Japan. And GFSI is a fully recognized non-profit organization in China. We have an MOU with CNCA since 3 years. So we do work very closely through the local group and with the engagement of the GFSI board with our dear stakeholders from China. And I can see my colleague nodding at the table. So that was for the national level, how we work with food safety authorities. At the international level, we have started to work 3 years ago with all those organizations. We work with UNIDO, the UN International Industrial Development Organization. They are providing a lot of trainings with the Global Markets Program in Africa, in Middle East, and in Southeast Asia using the Global Markets Program. We're working, as I told you, with OIE. We're working a lot with the STDF, which is implementing capacity buildings funding in emerging markets on the SPS agreement. This is a joint organization between several organizations and international standard setting bodies. We're working as well with IFC, the World Bank branch dedicated to the private investment. We have signed an MOU with IFC 2 years ago so that they can use the Global Markets Program as an incentive for companies so that they can provide financial tools. So they're giving loan to small and medium enterprise in emerging markets using the Global Markets Program. We are working with Codex. GFSI is an observer at Codex, and we are focusing on several topics at Codex. We have been collaborating with Codex to make the first World Food Safety Day a tremendous successful day on June 7, on the last June 7, and we launched the World Food Safety Day campaign together with the chairman of Codex at the GFSI conference last February in Nice. And I'm going to talk to you a bit more about what we call the government to business meeting, which is not there, but I'm going to come back. So the government to business meeting is a platform we created 3 years ago to have a specific dialogue between IGOs, food safety authorities, and the GFSI board of directors. This is a one-day event adjacent every year to the GFSI conference taking place the last week of February. This year we decided to work on 2 specific topics through dedicated workshops with national food authorities and IGOs and the GFSI boards. 2 topics have been identified: capacity building in emerging markets for SMEs, and the other one that might be of interest for you guys is what we call data sharing and transparency. So we decided to sit and to look at how we could share better data together between the private sector and the public sector, to have a better risk-based approach for national food control system, to look at food safety risk from the private sector. And the dialogue was so constructive that we say, okay, we don't have enough of 3 hours to discuss, so let's keep the work. And we're going to launch in a few weeks a remote working group between GFSI boards and authorities on data sharing and transparency, so that we can all reconvene in a few months at the next government to business meeting, next February 2020, to look at again this issue and to see what the work, the progress that has been done through this working group. So, e-commerce and food safety. Why am I talking to you about all that? You're going to connect the dots in a few minutes. 2 of our local groups, China local group and US-Canada local group, decided to work on e-commerce and food safety 2 years ago. And we said, okay, the project and the topic is so vast that we need to look at it from a local perspective first. This is the companies that are in the China local group. And they decided to all together work with the food safety authorities in China to look at the challenges and how they could work on e-commerce, to give guidelines to companies on how to manage food safety risk in their e-commerce supply chains, and to see how they could have a better understanding from the private sector about the regulation that is in place and what are the roles and responsibilities of everyone in those supply chain between the public and the private sector. The idea was really to have an open dialogue between the public and the private sector in China. 3 subgroups have been created. One on e-commerce catering, which is still trying to define some guidelines for that specific topic, but they are looking at creating a risk assessment report to see what are the risks and how they can mitigate them for the specific topic of catering. They're as well thinking about an e-commerce platform, giving guidelines for fresh products control, through that e-commerce platform. So this is a very multi-dimensional approach to identify what are the risks related to fresh products on e-commerce with the public and the private sector. And there is a subgroup, the Crossborder Ecommerce group, in that e-commerce working group. The idea was really for the private sector to understand what are the guidelines in place as well today from the government, and what are the challenges that the private sector is facing, and how they can together better understand their challenges and see how they can tackle them together. There was as well the objective, and they're still discussing on, to establish a cross-border e-commerce food recall mechanism, and to see how they can pilot that approach for a better global perspective. And what was important is that they did issue some guidelines for what they call industry self-discipline. So how we can have good practices among each other. What are the good practices of the leaders of the industry in terms of e-commerce, and how those good practices can become guidelines for what they call industry self-discipline. So the e-commerce working group in the US and Canada, this is a group that just started in January of this year. The objective is really to define the risk and the best practices to mitigate the risk that the industry will have identified in this working group. There is as well an objective to identify the role and the responsibilities of everyone through those risks that are being identified. Identify where are the gaps in the system, and we're talking about the system, we're talking about the supply chain. And as well, they wanted to identify what are the references in terms of good practices, regulation that is being done all over the world. So it's a huge project, but they are doing that quite well. Those are all the companies that are in this working group. We try to have a very broad approach to embark everyone, not only the producers, but as well the new players of e-commerce and the delivery companies as well. We do have the two food safety authorities as well in this working group. Canada Food Inspection Agency and the US FDA are participating in that working group. So what are the approaches they have taken? They have defined each key steps in the supply chain from pre-ordering to post-delivering. And they have mapped all the risks associated with all those steps. Defining those steps, what does it mean, a pre-ordering step for the industry and for the public authorities? And based on all those steps, they have identified the existing relevant food safety controls that are being done by the industry players today that are in this working group. I will share the presentations with you guys, but you can see an extract from the Excel spreadsheet they are starting to use. It's half empty because they are still working on it. But really, they have identified some 6 key steps right now on that they are working on assessing the risk and see how they can mitigate the risk. Ordering, preparing, shipping, receiving, and post-receiving. And they have seen that there are multiple risks with each of those steps, and now they are looking at how they can mitigate those risks. And as well, what is super important, they are looking at now how to include the ownership of the risk with this approach in each of those steps. The working group is going to finish in October its first work and give some first conclusion to the GFSI board of directors. And then the idea is to create a global working group based on the outcomes of the China and US-Canada work on e-commerce. But what we can already tell you at GFSI is that e-commerce is a very transversal global trend, and global trends and challenges like that needs to be tackled collaboratively by the public and the private sector, And we think that this is the role of Codex to tackle and discuss all together about the role and responsibilities. So we'll be happy to collaborate with Codex if there are further working groups that have been developed inside some Codex committee on e-commerce. We are looking at the work on Codex in Allergen on that topic right now. We think that a lot of pragmatism, consumers' perspective, and consumers' own choice needs to be really taken into account while thinking about e-commerce. We'll start to work and to see in the global working group how to include some requirements in our benchmarking requirements on e-commerce. What the local group in US and Canada has seen is that we need to have a specific focus, of course, on allergen, traceability, cold chain, and consumer available informations before purchase and after purchase and while delivering. And that's it. For now, you know that. So we'll start to work and launch a call for participation. All the GFSI technical working groups are open to anyone. So at the end of this year, we launch a public global call for participation for an e-commerce technical working group. We're welcome to collaborate in that working group with public authorities on that matter. And we hope it can give very concrete outcomes to further discussion at Codex level and in your own jurisdictions on e-commerce. That's it. I'm done.